6th, 2022, last policy meeting for the year. And I want to thank everyone for getting here through the snow. So we have 2 policies for the first reading and 2 policies for the second reading. The first policy for the first reading is subpoena of a school district employee, and we do not have a policy, and both of these policies that we're going to be reading for the first time will take 2 readings. And we have Teresa Severance here to speak towards this policy.
Yeah, so as was stated, we do not have a policy for subpoena of a school district employee at this point. This is an MSBA policy. We haven't changed it at all. And the reason I think it's important that we adopt it is that since I have been here, I have had 3 teachers and or other staff that have been subpoenaed. And so there's always a question about what do we do, how do we deal with it? So I thought we should be able to put something in place. And I also like the component here where it's specifically related to testifying for educational records and other administrative proceedings, and it really kind of speaks to some of the other data practices pieces, which I know are covered in a different policy, but it refers to that. So I think it would be a good policy for us to put in place, and many other districts have adopted this policy. Because it does happen occasionally, and like I said, since I've been here, it's been 3 times, so that I know of.
I was wondering, under 4B, where it says the school district official who is designated as the authority responsible for the collection use, I know we try to keep those general if we don't have to have someone specific, but who would that person be?
Did you say 4B?
Yeah. No employee may release educational data, personnel data, or any other data of any kind without consultation in advance with the school district official who is designated as the authority responsible.
So right now that comes out of the Office of Business Services, Brett Mensing, and with Simone's oversight, manage all the data practice pieces.
Thank you. No, on that same line, how are our staff trained on this? Or how would they be trained to know what to do?
That's a good question. I think we
have some openings in human resources
Yeah.
right now if you'd like to come on board.
We would, upon adoption of a policy like this, we probably would have to provide some guidance just so that make people aware that there is a policy, and then provide this is what we need to do.
Looking back or guessing that historically, that teacher, that school district official would probably sit down with legal counsel from the district to get some guidance.
Oh, definitely.
And if it's a teacher, they would probably have to get some guidance through the union legal counsel before they were put on the spot, I guess, under the subpoena. So,
Yeah, and normally the subpoena, at least those that I have been made aware of this year, have come with that conversation. So it's really just the notice that you're being subpoenaed to testify about X, Y, Z. And then the question comes, okay, who do I talk to? What can I tell? So they're good about asking that question. They have been.
So have they gotten support, legal support and counsel from
Yes.
our administrative legal team?
Yes. And we usually try to facilitate that. At least I have with those 3. I've facilitated that through our council.
So even though it kind of in response to Member Sadowski's question, that it goes to the Office of Business Services, you as HR director would kind of facilitate the processes.
Yes.
Is that also, I guess, ensuring that the subpoena is going to the appropriate person? I mean, has that been a problem in this so far or not?
It has not been a problem for those that I am aware of, but if it were an issue, then I think that's also where the consultation with our legal team, the person who was served would say, I have no knowledge of this, or, of that situation. And then the legal could help work with whoever this person that did the subpoena to just let them know that this isn't a appropriate person.
On that note, I do appreciate that D has that in there, that the administration shall confer with the school district legal counsels.
Yeah, I think anytime we get into a legal proceeding, whether it be administrative or, something more, more severe, that we would definitely want to include our legal counsel, just for guidance and discussion.
And, just a reminder, it's at our January organizational meeting where we decide which legal counsel we're going to use again, and we do use a number of different firms for different things, both local as well as in the Twin Cities that specialize in school affairs. Good questions. Any other questions on this one? This will have 2 readings.
I guess I was just curious, under 3, section 3, number 2, it said regulations under the federal law require that the school district must first make a reasonable effort to notify the parent of the student or the student, if the student is 18 years and older, of the subpoena in advance of releasing the information. Just curious for a definition of like what that might look like for a reasonable effort, especially if the student has been disconnected from school for one reason or another, or what might that look like?
Whether the two, it fits the notification for parent to the student. If the subpoena is related to a student or parent's data, how we go about notifying the parents.
Or the student if
Or
it's
the student if
yeah.
they're 18.
Actually, we haven't yet done. So that's, I would have to circle back and see what has been done in the past and how that operates, how I can circle
That's
back
totally fine.
and be
Just
ready for that at
curious.
the second reading.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just back to 4, again, applications and procedures. So the training, I guess, to staff includes particular building administrators or designated supervisor when the employee receives. So I guess our principals play a key role in the process playing out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on this one? And this was the model NSBA, and there were no changes that were made to it.
Correct.
Okay, and then the second one is policy 410, family and medical leave policy, to replace policy 4111, 4111, and the Family Medical Leave Act, nothing has changed in that. I think you had referenced when we had met earlier, but do you want to speak towards this?
Yeah, so just in looking at these older policies, as we've talked about, trying to get them out of those thousands and moving them into the 400s like the MSBA has, or into the hundreds like the SBA has, just kind of revisiting our policies. The FMLA itself has not changed, but some of the state regulations have, and some of the other pieces related to the military. And the model policy at MSBA just is a much more thorough document. And the previous policy that the district had in place, as you can see, is a bit old, but it also is more, there's a lot of process pieces there, and those processes, of course, could potentially change, and we want to just make sure that we have a more thorough explanation of the whole family medical leave and the components that are related to being able to use it. And that is just such a broader, the 410 MSBA is just such a broader, better scope, and just, it's really actually well written to cover every situation that someone might qualify.
Any comments or questions?
I appreciate appreciate that we're updating the policy, and as we know sometimes that there's legislative work that might come down the road too. I know that this is something that there's some possible changes being at least bandied about related to medical leave and family leave, and so if there were changes, we would also want to make sure that we down the road brought forward a policy that matched whatever new statutes might be in place if there were any. But I think that there's enough difference between our old policy and the new MSBA that it warrants down.
I had a question as to, like, is this type of content that's in this policy something that's also in, like, the contract at all, or is it separate from that? Does it have to, is there anything we need to double check there so it aligns or not? And then just,
So the answer to that question is the contracts refer to leaves. And they may reference like FMLA, but again, the FMLA itself has not changed. So, and whatever the FMLA is at the time would be what is covered under the contract. And so it doesn't go into the minutia whatsoever that this document does. So I don't think there would be any conflict between language that is in contracts and this particular document.
Agreed.
Contract might allow for sick leave to be used during that 4 weeks or 12 weeks.
yeah, there was some about that in here too.
So I think that's one of the things, the contract provides for sick leave, which is paid.
Right.
This provides for time away, which is not paid.
Sure, yes.
And then we, as a district, we require that people exhaust their paid leave before they go on unpaid leave. And so that would be applicable regardless of, you know, if they were FMLA qualified or not, they could still use sick leave. So I think there would still be there wouldn't be any conflict in relation to that. And there is a component in the previous policy that kind of talks about a little bit more layman's terms, I would say, about that piece where FMLA is mostly always unpaid, but we require that. And so we would have an administrative document that we're working on that would basically just kind of be the how. The process piece that is kind of previously in the old policy, it was a lot of process. We would make sure that we just have that on a separate document.
Are there any exceptions for requiring employees to use their sick leave? Are there exceptions? I was just curious.
There are a few exceptions in the law, and I guess I would have to,
That's okay. I
they're
don't-
very obscure.
Sure. So it's not a super conflict.
Right. And not all FMLA would qualify for sick leave either under contracts, so there's some other components that would come into play, parental leave potentially, if we had that coming forward.
Thank you.
Did you mention that the section in the new policy 410 where it covers active duty and covers service member, I mean, was that not as detailed in what we had in the past?
Right, the previous one just didn't have a lot of great explanation about that, and this one really gives a good definition and really qualifies it very clearly and succinctly of what we qualify. And it is a lot of words, which the FMLA just is, and the other thing that we are trying to put together is more of a FAQ type of document that employees could refer to, because that would also speak to kind of pay versus not pay, because I think that's definitely a big question that people don't understand. And then there's some other components too related to doctors' you know, the qualifications from a doctor's perspective and the paperwork and those different things.
So currently when we're onboarding new staff, do we review that in a lot of detail?
We don't.
And back to the other question, I put up the contract really fast, the teacher's contract. And on page 9, it talks about family medical leave, which we know they will reference back to HR department. So teachers shall be eligible for leave in accordance to the district's Family Medical Leave Act policy, and so on and so forth and so on. And that's it. That's it. There's one sentence there that refers them back to whatever the district has established as a policy.
Thanks for looking at that.
So then has this been run by Ethan and the DFT? Have they seen this?
No. Because it really doesn't fundamentally change, I mean, the FMLA is FMLA, and the state statute components, their Minnesota league laws are their laws, so there really
I just
isn't.
think they should be aware,
Oh, I can certainly let
so
them.
that they can.
Sure.
Share the policy with them.
Yeah,
They
absolutely,
have
We
time.
should probably share with all the bargaining units.
Yeah,
We're gonna
they
share
have
with
time to
bargaining.
go through it before.
for sure.
And thanks for your work on the question and answer thing too, the Q&A. I think that'll be really helpful for staff.
But your point is very, you know, which is important as we discuss this, even at the board meeting, is that FMLA has not changed. It's really having a more thorough policy based on updates from NSBA, and so the content hasn't changed.
And actually, the more I think about it, just sharing the information through our employee newsletter and other formats too would be a good way to make sure that we get it out. And if it's different enough, sometimes Human Resources sends an individual communication to all employees.
I guess I did have one more question under the special rules for instructional employees, section 5. Kind of like number 1, maybe number 4, it kind of talks about, I'll just read this one. If an instructional employee begins leave for any purpose more than 5 weeks before the end of the semester and is likely the leave will last at least 3 weeks, the school district may require that the leave be continued until the end of the semester. That was making it sound to me like, okay, employee A just needs 3 weeks or whatever they need, 5 weeks, but there's a couple weeks left. Do we still require them, require that to be unpaid if they could have come back anyway? I was just curious about how that was worded there. You see what I'm saying? Like if this employee could have come back for the last 2 weeks, and I also see from an education lens why that might be in there as far as consistency for students and things like that. I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
You know, typically because FMLA is unpaid, but if the district were to say, if someone was returned to work and we chose to not bring them back,
Right, if they could.
yeah,
Yeah.
we probably have to just have a little bit more discussion about what that would look like
Okay.
if that decision was made.
Okay.
And like I can see why, for the continuity of the education, why that could be a possibility, but
But that continuity, that can work both ways actually.
Sure
So, I mean, if substitutes are a challenge and you have an opportunity to get your full-time regular teacher back at an important time of the school year, you may probably want that person to come back. So,
I'd be curious just for a follow-up on that. No need for, yeah.
These are the kind of things why I think it needs to be looked at, why they would make sure that they're.
So just for follow-up then, Teresa as our HR director and John as our superintendent will make sure it's reviewed or put out there for our staff.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on it?
I don't have any more, but thank you for all your work on this. So.
It's also nice to get rid of some of the 1,000 series.
Exactly.
Well, sometimes the challenge,
Yeah.
and sometimes the challenge is gonna be, it's not like you got a red line copy to
Right.
compare this, that, you know,
Yeah.
and see where the changes are, you know, it's like,
It can be
you're
difficult.
looking at a wholesale rewrite.
Yep.
And digest it that way.
Okay, great, and then policies for our second reading was policy 722, public data and data subject request, and we have spent time on that at the last policy meeting as well, but were there any other additional questions? The contact information, the updated contact information with the Rice Lake address, at the end there, got it in. So we will have to bring it back, when we change our address again for, that minor change, but, any other additional questions?
I didn't have any questions. I just appreciate the work that went into this and the thoroughness of it, I guess, with all the additions.
And again, both NSBA and MASA, reviewed it, provided the state statutes and rules that the legal references, so you can review that again if you need. And then policy 534 was the school meals policy, and one of the big pieces of it was just around language changes to make it more really supportive for our families, and so any questions on or additional comments on that?
I'd just comment that there was a court declaration that this language needed to change, and it was kind of an immediate declaration, but it was nice to know that we've been following the mandated policies, or at least the mandated spirit of the policy, and that we had this in the works even prior to that, so that when we were asked about it, we were able to say that we haven't done shaming of students in years. I think we've got really progressive people leading those departments, and I'm proud of the work they're doing.
Yeah, it's been in the news a fair amount the last couple of years.
Do we have on the site, I think I looked at it when we first looked at this policy, but is this policy on the linked into the food service site on our website? I mean, I know it's with our other policies, but that would be good if it was linked in.
Could be something to consider for
Yeah.
sure.
I know when it was in the news, not our policy, but just in general, there was some questions out there, and I responded to a few just about how our district policy works, so it kind of made me think about
Appreciate that.
how accessible that is to the average person.
Yeah, we will, I'm looking on the site now. Doesn't appear that it's there, but we'll make sure that there's an update to the system and a link back to the policy.
If you think that makes sense, I mean.
It does.
Yeah, that's-
I think it does.
But we do have a section in the handbook that
Yeah.
does make reference to the school lunch policy. But I'm not seeing the policy number in here, so I don't know if that's something else that should be added and or
The
a
handbook
link,
committee
a
is
link to the
meeting,
online
right?
policy
Yeah,
too.
I was gonna say a link to
Yeah,
the online
yeah, a link.
policy, or just reference, they can be found here, but I think even right here, the narrative on the website, on the child nutrition information site, it can be explicitly stated in there, and so if someone goes there, they'll see that students will have the opportunities for, lunch without any kind of,
But that would be
Yes.
good in the handbook
as well.
as well.
Sounds good.
But I don't think it's that long of a policy. And we do have some specific policies in the handbook,
Thank you.
it's 3 pages. Okay, any other questions or comments? If you could pass on to Sheila again, our food service director, appreciation for her work on that. Anything else?
Just thinking about with the modifications and things coming up, thinking about what is it that we need to be thoughtful about for January, if there's anything that, we rearranged our policy meeting time. Have more conversation there, but if there's anything that people have in mind that they want us to consider, let us know prior to that.
Okay. And I think we can end this policy meeting. And at the December 20th board meeting, we will be voting on the second reading and the public data and school meal policy. And then all of these will be a part of the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.